On a morning shrouded in thick fog, in a peaceful coastal town, the Coast Guard towed away an elderly veteran's weathered boat. They left him standing silently on the dock. Why did they do it? What was so special about that vessel? And what prompted 6 naval ships to suddenly appear, bringing the entire town to a standstill? This isn't just the story of a confiscated boat. It's the journey of unwavering determination, quiet sacrifice, and how the ocean itself delivered justice to a forgotten hero. Join us as we uncover the tale of James Harrow, a Navy veteran whose loyalty and memories reminded an entire community of true valor. Stay tuned, because this story will take you from injustice to an unexpected climax, where the truth is revealed in ways no one could foresee. Subscribe to our channel to discover more compelling stories. James Harrow, at 78, is the quiet soul of Harbor Cove, a small town where the waves break against the shore as steadily as a heartbeat. For 40 years, he's lived simply in a tiny wooden house nestled by the pier, where from his bedroom window he can watch dawn paint its first streaks across the sea. Each morning, while the town still nestles under warm covers, James pulls on his worn coat, steps into his high boots, and makes his way outside with slow but determined strides. He offers a gentle nod to the fishermen returning from their pre-dawn voyages, sharing a warm smile before heading straight to the boat, Eleanor, waiting patiently for him. Eleanor, a time-worn oak vessel stained by years of salt and sun, is the embodiment of James's life story. 35 years ago, when he left the Navy after losing his wife in a storm offshore, he gathered every splinter of broken wood he could find and began rebuilding the boat from memory, reconstructing the final voyage he'd shared with his soulmate. Every grain of oak, every bolt, every beam was more than mere lumber and hardware. They became symbols of love and remembrance. To newcomers in Harbor Cove, Eleanor looked like any old boat. To James and the town's children, she was a masterpiece brimming with memories. Each summer, James holds a boating workshop for local teens. On the first day, he stands at the bow, salt and pepper hair whipping in the breeze, and waves to the eager youngsters. "Good morning, everyone. Today we learn how to tie rope." There's no long-winded introduction, just a few concise steps, followed by his clear instructions on how to knot the deck line and grip the tiller to avoid being capsized by a rogue wave. His eyes sparkle with excitement, and the young students listen intently, their unsteady hands clutching the rope. As he teaches, James feels as though he's training his younger self. He recalls the first time he stood on a naval deck amid a raging tempest, fastening the sail with makeshift cord. Back then, he believed humanity could stand firmer than any storm. Now, aboard Eleanor, he passes on not only sailing techniques, but the spirit of resilience and respect for the sea, a vast force that bows to no one. James doesn't stop at knots. He shows his pupils how to read weather signs. Clouds piling at the horizon foretell a coming storm. The sharp tang of salt in the air warns of a rising tide. He teaches them to watch the water's surface to gauge wind direction and observe sunlight filtering through the sails to sense shifts in gusts. Each lesson is woven with stories of past sorrows and triumphs. He recounts the night his wife vanished at sea. "It was pitch black. I saw only shadows crashing together and heard the winds roar. I lost her forever, but I refused to lose hope." His voice, thick with emotion, becomes a beacon in their hearts, proof that even in utter darkness, hope remains a guiding light. No boating lesson is complete without a moment of silence. After securing ropes and steering the helm, James asks the children to sit quietly on the bow and simply listen to the waves lapping the hull. He says, "Listen to the sea. You'll understand how small you are and learn to cherish every breath." In those peaceful moments, his gaze drifts over the swells, as if in dialogue with his memories. The children, initially restless, eventually fall silent, blending into the familiar stillness of the ocean. When the workshop ends, James presents each student with a small piece of wood carved into a boat. He tells them, "Carry this with you, as a reminder of courage and our love for the sea." Those tiny tokens, though humble, become cherished keepsakes, binding the children to Harbor Cove's past, a place where memory and hope intertwine. For 4 decades, James has never sought titles or recognition. He's simply been there, bearing witness to countless life stories, etching memories into the timber of Eleanor. Each time she cuts through the waves, her creaking timbers mingling with the ocean's roar, passers-by pause and murmur, "That's James Harrow, the man who keeps Harbor Cove's spirit alive." Locals recount that once the mayor proposed awarding James a medal for his quiet contributions. When the invitation arrived, he nodded politely, then slipped away behind his wooden door. He didn't crave honor. For James, true happiness lay in watching the children grow strong at the helm, their eyes fixed on the endless blue horizon. In winter, when thick fog blankets Harbor Cove, Eleanor is hauled onto the rocky shore and covered with a waterproof tarp. James retreats to his workshop beside the house, cleaning every plank and sealing small cracks. He whispers to the boat, "One day, we'll sail together again." It's a promise to himself, to his memories, and to the love he lost. Though time is unkind, James continues sowing seeds of hope through each wooden gift and every sailing lesson. He's crafting his life story with patience, devotion, and quiet fortitude, so that when Eleanor once more glides across the spring sea, anyone who glimpses her will see the silent figure of a true captain of the last age of sail. For an American audience, those who treasure tradition and independence, James Harrow stands as a symbol of unspoken bravery, of skill honed through hardship, and of wisdom passed down through generations. His story is not merely about an old man and his weathered boat. It's a testament to the power of memory, love, and the unyielding urge to rise above adversity. With each voyage of Eleanor, we witness a community united. We hear Harbor Cove's heartbeat, the heartbeat of souls that refuse to be defeated. A morning in Harbor Cove begins in such silence that even the slightest ripple on the water sounds soothing. Dawn's light filters through the mist, casting a shimmering silver glow across Eleanor. James Harrow, the venerable 78-year-old sailor, stands at her side, hands gripping the mooring line left over from yesterday's outing. Every movement is deliberate and sure. He peels back the tarp, inspects the mast, then carefully wipes down the wheel. He tends every detail, from chipped paint on the hull to the faintly rusted stainless steel clasps, as tenderly as a father cares for a child. Eleanor is not merely his livelihood, but a symbol of memory, of love for the sea, and of the wife he lost. When he pulls back the last cover, the engine's rumble rings out like a gentle chord. James feels his own heartbeat resonate with the throttle, a thrill of anticipation for what should be an ordinary voyage filled with freedom. He glances toward the quay, where fishing boats bustle, sailors hoisting canvas, others checking gear, and everything seems routine, until a Coast Guard SUV rounds the entrance and slams to a stop on the concrete with a single, echoing thud. A young officer steps out, stiff and icy-eyed. He approaches Eleanor, leans over her side, then demands, "Please present valid documentation." His tone is blunt, cutting through the crisp air like an arrow. James calmly retrieves a yellowed file from his coat pocket, inspection records under the old regulations, an exemption certificate from 1990, and the technical check report, and hands them over without protest. The officer frowns as he leafs through the pages, then closes the folder and places it back on the deck rail. Eleanor fails to meet the new technical standards. We've been ordered to seize all vessels lacking upgraded navigation and communication systems. There's no need for further explanation. His voice leaves no room for appeal. James replies softly to the space between them, though really to himself, that all documents comply with the former law, yet the force of the new regulation is overwhelming. Within 20 minutes, 2 patrol boats slice through the bay like angry waves, pulling alongside Eleanor. Officers leap aboard, rummaging through every compartment. The lifebox locker, the engine bay, even the tiny galley with its still warm coffee pot. They toss papers onto the floor, trampling the memories James has preserved in those pages. He stands with arms folded, his face composed yet pained, a powerless witness to the fury of bureaucracy. When their prying tools scrape against Eleanor's wooden hull, James feels as if someone has touched his own heart. He straightens, eyes following their every move, yet he utters no protest. Only when they begin to haul the boat away, firing up the engine to tow her off, does he step to the bow and ask in a voice deep as the surf, "Where will she be taken?" It's a small question, but in the stillness of the harbor it sounds like a challenge to the unseen authority targeting this old vessel. No one answers. The engine roars, and Eleanor slips away into the morning fog, vanishing behind a curtain of white. The quay falls into an eerie hush. Fishermen, dockhands, and the young volunteers who once crewed her all stand silent, eyes fixed on the departing boat. No one knows how to comfort James as he turns, still gripping the worn line that has tethered Eleanor through countless storms. A gentle breeze stirs his silver hair, sad as if it too mourns, and the sails seem to whisper their farewells. Within James's chest swirl so many emotions, disappointment, helplessness, and above all, an ache that won't relent. He imagines Eleanor drifting away with no clear destination. Leaning on the weathered railing, he recalls summer afternoons teaching children to knot lines and telling them stories of his wife. Each season, Eleanor was his classroom at sea, and now that classroom has been taken away, forbidden. But James Harrow is not a man to yield easily. He exhales a long, briny sigh and picks up a cobblestone from the quay, hurling it into the water with resolve. In that moment, he knows what he must do to preserve the legacy Eleanor carries in her oak heart. Regulations may change, but love for the ocean, the spirit of freedom, and the deep-rooted respect for the sea will never vanish. Life at the harbor returns to its usual rhythm, yet none will ever forget the sight of James standing alone in the pale light, wind lightly singing, a fraying rope in his hand. The tempest of emotion still surges quietly within him, urging an old soul to rise and fight for the values safeguarded across generations. And in that silence, all of Harbor Cove seems united in one aspiration: to reclaim Eleanor, to preserve the soul of their little town where freedom, courage, and community spirit endure, even when every rule conspires to change. News of Eleanor and James Harrow spread through Harbor Cove like an oil slick across calm waters, yet the little town remained eerily silent. That afternoon, a teenager seized an old phone and captured a close-up of James standing alone on the pier, shoulders hunched, eyes distant. The video went online under the blunt title, "Old Man Loses His Boat." Within hours, view counts climbed into the hundreds, but nobody lifted a finger to help. Whispers rippled through the town. "He's old. Just buy another boat." They had never understood how vital Eleanor was to James. To them, she was just an obsolete wooden hull. To anyone who had stood under James's guidance on deck, Eleanor embodied his heart, steeped in memories of his late wife, in every mast tied with tears, and in the laughter of summer sailing classes. While rumors swirled in cafes, general stores, and along cobblestone lanes, James Harrow sat quietly on an old wooden bench near the harbor. The late-day sun cast a pale gold light over his white hair, and the wrinkles etched into his face. From his coat pocket, he drew a brown leather journal, meticulously kept for 35 years, where he recorded tide times, wind directions, hidden dangers at sea, and all the joyful and painful memories he'd shared with generations of young sailors. Each frayed page, each smudged line of ink, formed a mental map that helped him rediscover himself after every voyage. James turned the pages until he reached the end, where a blank space had always awaited new entries. Today, that space was as empty as his heart, having watched Eleanor towed off in the morning mist. He furrowed his brow, finger trembling as it brushed the final page, but he wrote nothing. No words could capture such loss. Clara, the familiar local who owned the waterfront cafe, approached with a steaming cup of black coffee, setting it by his journal and offering a comforting nod. But James only shook his head. His gaze remained fixed on the sea. He didn't take a sip. The cup still billowed steam, yet any warmth it held drifted away on the evening breeze. The wind rustled through the reeds, carrying snippets of gossip about the Coast Guard's routine inspection. They called the seizure a mere formality, but their words were hollow, as if Eleanor were a lifeless object. No acknowledgement of her deeper value, no apology, no suggestion of a solution. The mayor, trusted by James for years, was nowhere to be seen. The city hall door remained firmly shut all day. Many who passed James on the pier did so in silence, unwilling to touch the pain of his story. They feared any disturbance, any trouble with the authorities. Perhaps in their minds, Eleanor was nothing more than an inanimate thing, not the living memory of a lifetime. Only James understood that when the patrol boats departed with Eleanor, they had truly taken a piece of his heart. As dusk fell, James rose from the bench and trudged toward the far end of the dock, each heavy step imprinting memories of countless storms onto the weathered planks. He sat beside an old bollard, legs swinging, fingers gripping the edge of the key. His eyes followed the hazy horizon, solitude filling his chest. Yet in that moment of seeming helplessness, a thought flickered. Memories cannot be seized by laws or regulations. Eleanor is merely the vessel that holds the story, and that story lives on in James's heart and in everyone who once stepped aboard. No matter how far the boat is dragged away, no one can erase the image of James teaching children to tie knots, to listen to the waves, to respect the sea. Suddenly, headlights appeared down the dock, 2 familiar cars arriving. Old friends emerged. Tom, the young boat builder from years past, Maya, the city librarian, and the kids who had learned to sail with James, now grown and helming their own vessels. They paused, wordless, and lit a small fire on the shore. A flickering lantern, some biscuits, and cups of coffee heated on a tiny portable stove. Tom stepped forward, placing a hand on James's shoulder. "We can't let Eleanor stay away from this harbor forever," Maya added, voice trembling but determined. "I've gathered both old and new technical certificates, enough to prove compliance with both sets of regulations. We'll present them to the mayor and the press." The grown-up students laid stones in front of James, each pebble a memory tied to Eleanor. James looked back at them and smiled, a wordless smile, yet powerful enough to inspire the group. He held up his leather journal to the lantern's glow and carefully recorded today's date in firm script. Under that ink, a new milestone was etched, not a log of a voyage, but the beginning of a campaign to preserve Harbor Cove's spirit. That night, Harbor Cove fell silent no more. Murmurs became calls to action. The video, "Old Man Loses His Boat," spread across community forums with the caption, "Stand with us to save Harbor Cove's legacy. Save Eleanor." Supporters from afar pledged to arrive in person or to petition the authorities. Fishermen, shopkeepers, families of former sailing students, all vowed to challenge the Coast Guard's unlawful seizure. By nightfall, the harbor lights shone brighter than ever. Determined faces of the community glowed in the lantern light. They had realized, Eleanor is more than a boat. She is the town's soul, a symbol of courage, of love for the sea, and of the bonds that unite them. Under a canopy of stars, James Harrow lifted his head, eyes glinting with hope. He knew the fight to reclaim Eleanor would be fraught, like the fiercest storms offshore. But he was no longer alone. In every heart of Harbor Cove, the spirit of freedom and the resolve to protect their heritage had ignited. And in that moment, the whisper of the sea echoed their conviction. Nothing can stand against the will of a united community. Midday in Harbor Cove brought the gentle heat of summer, yet the air remained heavy with anxiety. Ethan, James's 24-year-old grandson, strode into the late afternoon scene wearing his faded cadet jacket, a relic of his days in uniform. He approached the wooden bench where his grandfather sat motionless, sorrow etched into his weathered face. Without unnecessary words, Ethan leaned in, voice both tender and resolute. "Grandpa, what happened?" James did not reply at once. Instead, he fixed his gaze on the far end of the pier where the evening mist still lingered. At last, he whispered as though confiding in an old friend. "They took Eleanor. No warning, no explanation." His voice cracked, echoing like waves battering a hull in a storm. Ethan's muscular hand clenched, trembling slightly, before he pulled out his phone and dialed an old Navy comrade. The call lasted only a few sentences, enough to convey the urgency. Eleanor, the oak vessel woven into James's life story, had been seized by the Coast Guard. Ethan spoke sharply, relaying the image of the old man without his boat spreading online. Meanwhile, James sat quietly, neither intervening nor urging his grandson on. He simply watched the tide rise and fall, as if the ocean itself whispered of what was to come. On social media, the video "Old Man Loses His Boat" exploded overnight. Hundreds, then thousands of views surged, accompanied by comments brimming with regret, outrage, and hope for change. At the same time, old photographs of Eleanor circulated everywhere. James teaching children to tie knots on deck, passion alight in his focused expression. Eleanor's sails billowing amid a storm, white spray flying. The boat delivering relief supplies through flooded streets, proof of her long legacy of service. The story became clear. This was not merely about an unjustly seized vessel, but about 40 years of devotion from a man who gave his heart to the sea and his community. To an American audience, those who cherish tradition, freedom, and a can-do spirit, James Harrow's image resonated as a symbol of perseverance and boundless love. People began sharing posts tagged #Bring Back Eleanor, calling on authorities to reconsider the seizure. Ethan set down his phone, eyes bright with newfound hope. "The Navy has seen the video and is contacting local officials," he said, voice trembling with expectation. To James, those words shone like a ray of light piercing the gloom. He looked up, the corner of his mouth lifting in a faint smile, enough to warm his grandson's heart. Though he spoke no further, his eyes spoke volumes. The value of the past cannot be forgotten, and the strength of a community can change the fate of its living symbols. Within hours, veterans and Harbor Cove residents gathered at the pier, brandishing handmade signs, "Return what's James's," and "Eleanor, heart of our harbor." Their voices rang out across the open space, while each heart remained focused on the silent figure of James on the wooden bench. The children he once taught to sail, now teens and young adults, joined in, chanting for "a legacy cherished by every generation." As the sun sank and the brilliant sunset painted the sea like an oil canvas, James rose and placed his frail hand on Ethan's shoulder, passing on both strength and faith. No words were needed. His gesture conveyed gratitude for their support, hope for the journey ahead, and determination to reclaim Eleanor, not just for himself, but for all of Harbor Cove. When night fell, the silence lifted. News spread along the East Coast and even to Pacific towns. A small article in the U.S. Navy's newspaper lauded James Harrow as guardian of the sea's spirit, calling Eleanor a gift from the past worth protecting. On social media, thousands shared messages. "She's more than a boat. She's a story of heart and memory." Finally, Ethan placed his hand on his grandfather's shoulder, gaze fixed on the vast horizon where Eleanor might be moored. "We'll bring her home, Grandpa," he declared, voice edged with resolve. James turned to him, eyes reflecting starlight on the water. He nodded gently, smiling kindly, an acknowledgement that the fight to reclaim Eleanor had only just begun, but no storm, however fierce, could break their unity. Harbor Cove lay under the soft murmur of waves, joined by the chorus of a determined community and their whispered aspirations. Above, the first star appeared, illuminating the path back to the boat, where a man and his grandson would write the next chapter of Eleanor's saga, a tale of love for the sea and the power of human memory. Late afternoon in Harbor Cove was unlike any that had come before. As the sun slipped toward the horizon, an unusually thick fog rolled in, cloaking the harbor in a veil of milky white. That mist did more than drift gently over the water. It pressed down, as if intent on muffling every sound and smothering every sight. The pier lights glimmered dimly, masts and cranes fading into the damp haze, forging an almost magical tableau. Then, 3 foghorn blasts rang out in succession, low and resonant, causing every heart hiding in the harbor to skip a beat. The note was neither shrill like an alarm, nor sharp like a passing ship's horn. It was warm and vibrating, stirring the layers of fog itself. Ethan, standing beside his grandfather, snapped awake as though jolted from a dream. He straightened, eyes wide with surprise. James Harrow, nearly 80 yet undaunted, held his chin high, eyes bright like a compass needle, reflecting both concern and sharp alertness. A hush fell. No wind, no lapping waves. Then 6 enormous silhouettes emerged from the mist. At first, many thought them fishing vessels or large yachts, but their scale and regal bearing left no doubt. 6 naval warships, colossal and imposing, silently entered the harbor. No warning lights, no flashing signals, just a weighty silence, as if cold steel walls had risen across the water. The crowd on the pier froze into statues. Noodle vendors paused mid-scoop. Tourists halted their snapshots, and laughing children ceased their play. All motion drained away, leaving only the hulking vessels gliding effortlessly across the bay, trailing iris-like ripples. On the lead ship's deck, an officer in crisp white dress stood at attention, his calm, unwavering gaze seeming to have awaited this moment for ages. As the 6 ships reached the harbor's shallow shoal, they dropped anchor in precise formation. The sky, thick with chill fog, watched in silence as the flag on the central mast lowered halfway, an unspoken salute and warning. The crews snapped to rigid attention, their dark blue uniforms and white caps immaculate, radiating discipline. All eyes fixed on James Harrow, the lone figure daring to stand at the water's edge, defying the unspoken expectations of the commanding officer. The crowd remained silent. If words drifted at all, they did so as faint whispers in the mist. No prior notice, no explanation. Before them stood 6 warships, steel phantoms materializing from the void. Each act followed ritual. Anchor dropped, flag dipped, crew aligned. Every movement crisp and powerful, imbuing the scene with both awe and nameless dread. James stepped forward, each measured footfall echoing on the wooden pier. His coat hung loosely, collar turned up, mist curling like silver threads around him. He spoke no word, letting his gaze tell the story. In eyes that had known 4 decades at sea, one could see pride, sorrow, and a steadfast resolve not to endure another loss. The ocean may rest in silence, but every wave, every vessel, every mast proclaims the yearning for freedom and memories that must not be buried. Ethan caught up to him, pausing at his grandfather's side. He asked nothing, for no words could pierce this moment. Together, they watched the naval armada exert its silent authority over the old harbor. Though youth endowed Ethan with swift reflexes, even he stood mute, attuned to the salt-laden breath of the air. Behind the warships, Harbor Cove's red-tiled roofs, the town clock tower, the waterfront cafe, all faded into the mist. Onlookers wondered how long this inspection might last, and how many memories would be suspended in its wake. The Coast Guard had only taken Eleanor once. Now, the presence of 6 warships felt like power unbound by custom. These steel leviathans declared that not only a single vessel, but the very soul of the harbor could be brought to heel. Time seemed to stand still. In the shifting fog, every breath rose and fell as a heartbeat. James lifted his chin and met the commanding officer's stare. No words passed between them, only silent defiance and unwavering resolve. Though his years were many, James's stance remained firm. Harbor Cove is not a proving ground to be trifled with. He had weathered storms, gales, and towering seas with Eleanor. Now he would not bow to any metallic force. A second trio of foghorns sounded from the flagship, deeper, more sustained, signaling the next order. Yet the commanding officer uttered no command. His crew turned their caps toward James, a synchronized gesture that seemed to ask, "Will you comply?" James replied with a subtle nod, ready to listen, but unbowed. He knew that whatever dialogue might follow, the truth lay in the memories of teaching children knots, of relief missions in floodwaters, of Eleanor as the emblem of freedom beyond all bounds. As the 6th ship came fully to rest, the fog slowly parted, revealing all 6 gleaming hulls anchored in parallel to the quay. The townsfolk edged forward cautiously, curiosity and a trace of fear illuminating their eyes. Every rooftop and porch facing the harbor bore witness to these intruders overshadowing decades of peaceful routine. At last, James unclasped his coat and descended the wooden steps to the dock. Each deliberate step marked a solid path, leading to the conversation to come, not only with the naval officer, but with Harbor Cove's own history, and with the generations who had lived and loved this place. In that moment, sea and man became one. The fog receded, harbor lights glittered, Eleanor lay hidden behind 6 steel phantoms, and James Harrow, last commander of an age of sail, stood proud. An American audience, valuing bold spirit and cherished tradition, would understand that this was not simply an old man confronting the Navy, but a silent struggle to defend freedom, heritage, and the indomitable human will. A small boat was lowered from the lead ship's deck like a swallow in the mist. It bobbed gently on the water as cables were slowly released. The crowd on the pier watched breathlessly, the cold wind tugging at their coats. When the dinghy touched the dock, 2 officers stepped aboard. One knelt to solemnly present the folded flag in his hands. The other, Admiral Richard Hayes, stately in his pristine white uniform, broke into a formal salute. The gun salute and deep trumpet calls echoed like the sea's own music, stirring hearts with pride and emotion. Admiral Hayes walked straight to James Harrow, his gaze gentle yet dignified. He bowed respectfully, then spoke in a clear, resonant voice that carried through the fog. In 1983, aboard the USS Patriot, you served as chief engineer in the main engine room. When flames erupted and black smoke billowed, you braved the inferno and toxic fumes to stop a fuel leak. Because of your courage, 23 sailors were saved. You suffered serious injuries yourself, yet refused any personal awards, wishing only that your fallen comrades be honored. The harbor fell deathly silent. No one had known this story, despite James Harrow living among them for 40 years. He had survived the sea's fiercest storms and faced death itself in that engine room blaze. The image of this aging yet heroic man took on legendary proportions in every mind. Even the gentle lapping of waves seemed dignified, as if offering gratitude for his silent sacrifice. Admiral Hayes withdrew a gilded bronze plaque from his chest, inscribed, "In grateful recognition of James Harrow's silent courage, a hero beyond acclaim." He presented it to James, whose hands trembled yet held steady. Then he handed over the neatly folded flag, the nation's sacred symbol, its very threads woven with freedom's price. The air seemed to burst. Soft sobs and gentle applause rose, the vivid red, white, and blue unfolding in James's hands like the heartbeat of the harbor. On the 6 warships, crews rendered an honor salute in unison. They stood in precise formation, eyes fixed on the man who had once saved their shipmates. The spectators on the pier held their breath, refraining from raucous cheers, quietly witnessing this fog-shrouded tribute. Every gaze, every trembling hand pressed to heart, honored the fusion of past and present, sea and humanity in a moment of indescribable reverence. As the fog lifted and the crimson sunset bathed the water, James closed his eyes, pressing the flag to his chest as though embracing a lifetime's worth of memories. The wear of time marked his faded gray coat, yet his eyes shone with pride and fulfillment. He spoke no words. His calm, serene bearing spoke volumes. That a heart once overlooked had finally received its rightful recognition. Admiral Hayes and his crew offered one final salute before withdrawing, their silhouettes fading into the lingering mist. As the destroyer's engines roared to life, echoing against the cliffs and stirring the song of the waves. Harbor Cove's very air was transformed forever. This little harbor now stands as a keeper of courage and sacrifice. To an American audience, James Harrow's story is more than a sea legend. It is a testament to faith in silent heroes, those who place their community's welfare above personal glory, and who stand ever ready to face danger to protect all life. 2 weeks passed since Eleanor vanished into the mist. Harbor Cove seemed to hold its breath in quiet anticipation. Everyone waited anxiously for news of the oak vessel bound up in so many memories. Then one morning, the tugboat's engine roared to life, snapping every gaze from daily chores. Eleanor returned, but she was no longer whole. Here and there, her hull bore scraped scars. One cabin door was shattered, shards of glass littering the deck. Sunlight streamed through the broken planking, casting interlaced patches of light and shadow that spoke of emptiness. James Harrow, lean and silver-haired, stepped off the gangway. He moved slowly toward the hull, lifted a trembling finger to trace peeling paint and fresh cracks. Sorrow filled his eyes, yet there was no blame. He uttered no complaint, only the solemn silence of a weathered heart that had weathered every storm. Witnesses were moved to tears, realizing that Eleanor was more than a boat. She was the soul tethered to him for 4 decades. That very silence awoke Harbor Cove's spirit. The community recognized James's immeasurable gift. From teaching youngsters to row to daring offshore rescues, Eleanor had stood faithfully by his side, inspiring generations. No one thought of him now as merely the old boat builder. People took to social media to demand her return. Bring back Eleanor and honor James Harrow. The very next day, a local shipwright named Miguel, once James's apprentice as a boy, volunteered to haul Eleanor into his workshop. He nestled her amid planks of wood and sanding machines, hands unafraid of grease, filing each crack in her hull. At the waterfront cafe, veterans, many whose lives James had saved, gathered to pool funds for new planks and tools. Carpenters, painters, electricians, and mechanics all stepped forward to work unpaid, calling it a community project. Ethan, James's grandson, was entrusted to lead the effort. He pored over his grandfather's original blueprints, meticulously noting every plank dimension, mast position, rigging detail, and the subtle modifications James had made over the years. Those hand-inked drawings held the essence of the man himself. Ethan assigned teams, plank cutters here, frame fitters there, seam checkers over there. A spirit of diligent camaraderie filled the workshop. Hammer strikes, drills, sanding belts, and laughter replaced the earlier hush. Each new oak board fitted into the hull carried redemption and memory. Miguel saved the broken original fragments, setting them in a corner of the shop as relics of past sorrows. When refastening those old planks, he would turn his face to wipe away a sudden tear. He even restored the old wave-worn scratches, honoring them as marks of Eleanor's storied journey. Every afternoon, James returned to the shop to watch the work unfold. He neither prodded nor complained. His eyes lit up at the sight of carpenters drilling new boards, at Ethan's careful measurements, at the veteran's laughter echoing from the next room. Before, he had been initiator, teacher, and sole craftsman. Now he reveled in being the recipient of his community's care and gratitude. 2 weeks on, Eleanor's new frame took shape. Gleaming white oak planks were fitted snugly, a sea blue tinted primer applied evenly, and a classic deep brown finish brushed across her hull like a fresh cloak. Modern synthetic rigging was installed alongside the old insulated turbine engine. The new cabin sported reinforced glass and stainless steel framing, ensuring safety in rough seas. At last, on a clear morning when sunlight streamed through the workshop windows, Eleanor's rebuild was complete. James stepped forward and laid his frail hand on her bow. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply as if drawing in both the boat's breath and the seas. When he opened them, a gentle smile and sparkling joy shone in his gaze. That smile spoke of more than seeing his creation reborn. It was the smile of a heart healed by community. Under a brilliant sky, the renewed Eleanor was towed back to the pier amid cheers. Townsfolk lined both sides, children waving banners. "Welcome home, Eleanor, and thank you, James Harrow." Ethan led the procession, followed by Miguel, the veterans, and the workshop crew, all beaming with pride. The harbor's horns sounded in a triumphant chorus, a hymn of pride and unity. News of this miraculous restoration spread swiftly. The social media video, "Eleanor Rises Again, The Power of Community," garnered millions of views in days. James Harrow's story, the 78-year-old silent hero, inspired America and beyond, reminding all of loyalty, solidarity, and the power of quiet devotion. Harbor Cove was forever changed. Eleanor, bearing new planks and old scars, became a living emblem of resilience and love for the sea. And though James Harrow's years advanced, he stood ready to step aboard, helm in hand, eyes on the boundless horizon, where dreams and hope never fade. To every American who hears his name, he embodies a lesson. That true strength often rises not from shouting, but from humble deeds and steadfast hearts.